All right, I guess it's my turn for 10 minutes. So, again, my name's Doug Harrison. I'm an alcoholic. A little bit about what it was like for me. I started drinking at an early age. I can't remember how early that was, but it was sometime around junior high school. And I just pretty much drank like, with the kids in the neighborhood. It was just something to do. We stole little 6-ounce, 8-ounce Miller Lights out of our parents' refrigerator, and we got together and we split them up and we drank them. And whether it was to fit in or whatever, at that time, I don't really know. We just did it. It was something to do. We were bored, I guess. But I remember once getting into high school, I hooked up with this girl, and by then I'd been drinking quite a bit. And by about the, end of my ninth grade, I was drinking every day before, during, after school. On the way to school, I had a bottle of Jim Beam in my locker, and the first thing I did when I got to school is I bought a Coke. I poured half of it out, filled the rest up with Jim Beam or whatever it was I had for the day, and I went to class. And somehow I managed to graduate from that high school without too many problems. I got decent grades, and it was a daily thing for me to come home, and my parents had cleaned out my bedroom once again, and there was bags and bags of beer cans and bottles, and they really didn't give me too much shit because I never got in trouble. I was always the one that could walk through a party after it had gotten busted by the cops, and I could just wave to the cop, walk on by, never got caught, never got stopped, never got arrested, whatever. Drove home drunk all the time. I drove drunk every day, to school, from school, whatever. So and that's the way I lived for a long time. And slowly I got started doing recreational drugs and stuff, just the kind of stuff that my friends were doing in high school. And it's weird, though, looking back on, when I was young, I was afraid to death of drugs, just from the films you learned in school or your parents teaching you this and that. And the first time anybody, I was ever around it, I made them, go, it was at a concert, and I made them sit, 13 seats away from me. I didn't want to be around this marijuana and stuff. But anyway, that was I was brought up just kind of sheltered and stuff. And so once I got into high school and was exposed to more of that stuff and drinking all the time, my friends started doing it, and it just became kind of acceptable to me, and they weren't, getting into trouble. So I started trying little this, little that, and it was no big deal. And for years, that's just what I did. I drank and I used, and I held jobs, and I finished school and had nice cars and things and whatever, and that's just the way it went for a long time. And eventually, I just started getting more and more into it. And by the time I was 21, I started doing a lot more drugs, and that's just the way it was. And alcohol led me to do a lot of things that I would have normally not done. And I did a lot of things that I despised and hated, and never thought that I'd end up doing. And doing heroin was one of them. And by the time I was 23, I had been drinking since I was 14, 15 every day, and now I'm doing a lot of heroin and other drugs, and that luck that I had run out. I had started getting stopped by the cops all the time, getting arrested all the time, and my parents were a wreck. They they didn't know what to do with me, and they started finding rehabs for me to go to. By this time, I had moved back in with them. They're finding all the beer cans and bottles that they had been finding before, but now they're finding other things, and my parents were still married, good people, never done drugs, don't drink, so they're finding all this stuff in their house, and they're freaking out. And so they start sending me to rehabs, and for 12 years that's how I lived, in and out of rehabs, in and out of jail, in and out of living on the streets, sleeping in alleys, and stealing and robbing and burning everybody I knew, and the kind of people that I was hanging out with. It was funny, I was thinking about this on the way here. One of my best friends, and I don't know how I can call him that, but I ended up living with this guy who I thought I knew, and apparently I didn't. This guy was a so-called artist, right? And he had just this crazy. We had this crazy 8-bedroom house. We paid nothing for it, and this was in Arizona. And the kind of people that I was hanging out with had, he had mannequins hanging from ceilings around the house. And they were young kid mannequins, bound and tied up and hanging from the ceiling with Boy Scout blindfolds on. And I thought nothing of this until tonight it hit me, and I was just Anyway, I don't know how I got off onto that. That's the kind of people I was hanging out with, and I can remember in high school, I had plans for my life, and it wasn't to end up living with people like that and hanging out with people like that, And I remember beating the shit out of a friend of mine for shooting up for the first time, and that's how much I hated drugs. And anyway, I had become all the things that I despised most. I robbed and stole from my parents daily. Whenever they weren't home, I was there taking whatever they had, And I remember my sister graduated from college, and it was a big deal because I didn't go to college. And while they were at the little graduation party, I went and I stole all the cash that she had gotten. It was, I don't know, whatever, a few $100s, and that's just the way I lived. And I just robbed and stole. And that guy that I was just talking about that I lived with, he eventually turned on me. And I remember I came down, I had the whole upstairs of the house, and I came down, and he had painted all over the rooms of this house like thief, liar, piece of shit, and that's what I had become, and that's what I thought of myself. I hated myself for the things that I was doing, and fast forward like 12 years later, through numerous detoxes and emergency rooms and jails and program after program, long-term, short-term, Christian, 12-step, I'd pretty much done it all. My mom was always looking for the one that was going to fix me, and she could never find it. And about 4 years ago, I came out to Long Beach to yet another rehab, a really, really nice, expensive, on the beach kind of thing, and this was the one. This was the one that was going to fix me. And I stayed in that program for 60 days, and that was the longest that I had sober, And for a long time, I thought if I just really wanted to quit, I could, And if I could just get a couple days together, I could stop, and I couldn't, So I come out to this program in Long Beach, and I was introduced to Alcoholics Anonymous. We were allowed to go to meetings, and we went to like 2 meetings a day, and I remember the first meeting that I went to, it was a speaker meeting over at East Bay, and I had just gotten out of detox after 8 days. It was a Sunday, and I remember sitting in that meeting with my head against the glass window just because it was nice and cool, and I was sweating, and I felt like shit, and I remember hearing something the speaker said. I don't know who he was or even what he looked like because I couldn't focus on him, and I was sitting like 2 rows away from him, but I remember hearing something in that meeting, and I knew that if anything was going to help me, it was going to be this program. And so I went to meetings every day, and I stayed sober for that 60 days, and I got out of that program, and I don't know, within a few weeks or whatever, I had started using again, started drinking again, but I was still going to meetings, and I thought if I just kept going around meetings and hanging out with people that were sober, I'd eventually stay sober, and I did that for years, I went to meetings loaded, I went to meetings drunk, I led meetings loaded, and I stole from people in the program, and I stole from, I love what my sponsor says about the desire to stop drinking, and he says that we can give you anything you need around these rooms, jobs, places to live, cars, whatever, everything except for that desire to stop drinking. We can't give that to you. It's got to come from God, he says. And I didn't understand that for a long time. And so I had gotten all these things. I had gotten, a car to drive all the time or a job, through people in the program. And eventually I ended up burning them. I ended up stealing from them, or taking whatever I could and just going off and doing what I had to do. And so after a few more arrests and a few more detoxes and a lot more meetings, I was in another program. I had gotten arrested, and I had gotten court-ordered to Salvation Army. And I stayed in that program for 6 months, and I was supposed to stay there a year, and I didn't stay sober there. It was once again, I was just fooling everybody. I was getting away with whatever I could, acting, playing the part of, the sober, going to meetings and acting like I was sober and fooling a lot of people, And that stuff always eventually caught up with me, and I ended up getting caught in that program. The night of my graduation, I get caught. I get U8 or whatever, and 2 days previous to that, me and this other guy had found $3,600 cash in the warehouse, and no big deal. Here I am on probation. I'm court ordered there. I'm definitely looking at going back to prison, and so I hit the streets. I got like all my family's in town for this thing. It's like this big deal. And they thought I was doing so well once again, and I got kicked out that night, but I had all this money, so I really didn't care. But I ended up sitting in a hotel room for like 2 weeks with all that cash and all the alcohol I could, ever want or think I could ever want, and a lot of other things, and I was miserable, man. And I just, once again, I was at that point where I just hated myself, and I woke up in the morning crying, and I fell asleep at night crying, and I couldn't put enough of that stuff in me to make me feel any different, And for the first time in my life, I started calling a detox or a program on my own without, calling my mom to bail me out or find me another program or whatever, all the things that I'd done before. And I eventually got into a detox and into another program. And I've been hearing a lot of things around these rooms for those years that I went loaded, and keep coming back and all the little cliches that you hear that you don't really pay attention to. And it's funny, I heard at a meeting the other night, pay attention to the readings, always pay attention to the readings. As monotonous as they get and as many times as you hear them, he said, pay attention to them because sometimes it's the only truth you're going to hear in these meetings. And that's the truth. And it's so true, So I knew a lot of that stuff. I had read the big book, and I had been calling sponsors that I had and taking suggestions, and direction. But I'd only do the things that I wanted to do. Like I wasn't willing to go out and pick up cigarette butts because I didn't smoke. I wasn't picking up cigarette butts, and I didn't really drink that much coffee. So why should I have to make it, And I'd fixed up my little area where I sat, and I'd push my chair in. But I'm damned if I want to push everybody else's in. That kind of attitude that's the attitude I had. How the hell is that going to keep me sober? And anyway, so I went to that program, and I started thinking about all those things. And for the first time in my life, I started thinking about this guy telling me that you need to get down on your knees and pray. And like I said, I'd been to a lot of places, and some of them in Christian rehabs, and some of them were like long-term, 18-month Christian rehab, hardcore, church every day of the week. And I that wasn't for me. I didn't like the word God. I didn't want to think of myself as being, whatever, And but I was sitting in that program, and I didn't know what else to do. And one night, this guy that had some time, talked to me about getting on my knees and praying, and I did that. And from that moment on, I just heard this little voice that said it's going to be all right. And I didn't know what I was praying to or have a higher power or what I was going to say. I just did it, And from that moment on, it's been okay, I came back down to Long Beach from that program. It was a little over a year ago, and for 12 years, I couldn't put together more than 60 days, And usually it wasn't even that long, but my life's good today. I like being sober, And I don't always like what I got to deal with today. I'm going through some shit right now. It's driving me nuts. But compared to what it was like, it's a hell of a lot better. I like myself today, and I'm comfortable with myself today. And I've got a lot of friends in my life, and I got people I can call in this program, and they'll be there for me. And I get to do a lot of things today. When I first got back down, in my first couple of months, I got to go out and see Jack caught this 245-pound marlin. And I just wasn't doing that kind of thing. When I was getting loaded, I stayed in hotel rooms, I ran around the streets, I boosted, I stole, I robbed. That's just what I did every day. And, I didn't have friends, and I didn't have things. And, I got this amazing job today, and it's all these things that you hear about getting in this program. You'll get these things back, jobs, girlfriends, cars, house, whatever, all that stuff. But none of that stuff keeps me sober today, I don't have everything I want today, but I have enough to, be pretty comfortable. And it doesn't matter. None of that stuff matters. Now, what keeps me sober is doing stuff like this when I don't want to do it, going to meetings every day. I got a couple commitments, go on panels and all that crap, and most of the time I don't want to do it, but by the time I go home, I feel a lot better about myself for doing it, and I sleep well at night, and I get up in the morning, and I try to be responsible today, and it doesn't always work out, but so that's it. I love this program, and I love what it's given me, and I hope you guys can stick around, so that's it. Treasures